Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. You know who it wasn't a positive step in the right direction for? The Kentucky Wildcats. Okay, so it's kind of funny. So first of all, let me get the sad part out of the way off the top. Mark Stoops did have a very tough week personally in his personal life last week. His mother passed away. Certainly wish him and his family the best. And when I criticize him in the coming minutes, I don't want it to sound like a personal attack. But I have a job to do. You know, Kentucky fans as season ticket holders, as people who pay for a product, have an expectation. And transparently, Mark Stoops has a job to do as well. And I don't know. I don't want to make it sound personal because that's not my intention. But what I will say, coming into this game, you're playing Auburn. You're at home. It's your final SEC home game, by the way. And Auburn hasn't won a game. And it's kind of crazy because I was talking to producer Matt about this throughout the week. For people who don't know, producer Matt is an Auburn grad. I said, Auburn keeps playing hard. They haven't gotten across the finish line yet, but probably should have beaten Missouri, should have beaten Oklahoma. And I don't know what to make of this Kentucky team. Well, now, after Saturday night, there is no doubt. Congrats to Auburn. The 24-10 win gives them their first win in SEC play. But to me, the story is Mark Stoops. Kentucky now is 3-5 overall. They've lost 3 games that were really sort of winnable. I believe they were favorites in all 3 of them. And I'll be transparent. As this thing continues to unfold, no disrespect intended, whatever. I just kind of feel like the Mark Stoops era has run its course, and it'd be good, and I think it's going to happen if these two sides figure out a way where Mark Stoops is not the head coach at Kentucky next year. Before we get into it, a couple caveats I always try to say. Whenever, things aren't good with Kentucky and Mark Stoops right now, but I think the national person would sit there and say, Torres, Mark Stoops is the best coach they've ever had. And what I would say, and I've said this consistently, he has elevated Kentucky to levels that we probably couldn't have expected when he took over in 2009, 2010, that time frame. Bottom line, they've been to a bowl game every year since 2015. He has elevated the program, there is no doubt. What you also can't deny is that the program is absolutely 100% not only trending in the wrong direction, it's probably in as bad of a spot as really it's been pretty much since like year 1, year 2, year 3 of the Stoops era. Here's the bottom line. These are the stats. These are inarguable. If you're a national person that doesn't follow Kentucky on a day-to-day basis and you're just sitting there saying Stoops is great, whatever. Well, first of all, the coaching salaries came out a few weeks ago. He's one of the highest paid coaches in college football. And I know Kentucky's a tough job, but when you're paid that much money, you have a responsibility to win at a relatively high level. Well, here are the facts. Kentucky has now, this is incredible. They've lost 7 straight SEC home games. They've lost 7 straight SEC home games. As you can see, producer Matt did a great job on the screen. This is the first time since 2013 they have not won an SEC home game on their schedule. So this is the first time since 2013, over a decade, that they didn't win a single SEC home game. And they're now 2-13 in their, 2-11 in their last 13 SEC home games. 2-11 over a 3-year stretch in SEC home games. Now, I understand Georgia's really good. You had Bama come through once or twice. LSU most years is really good. But to be 2-13, that's over a 3-year stretch. I don't want to say it's inexcusable, but at the same time, there's a lot of people at Kentucky that are paying a lot of money to show up to that stadium every single week. And the crazy part is, this was the first game that it felt like people are checked out. They're just checked out, and I don't think it's getting any better. The truth is, listen, I give Kentucky fans credit. We talked about this after the South Carolina game. Kentucky fans showed up ready to go for that South Carolina game. The team let them down. A week later, they came ready to go for number 1 Georgia in a game that the team probably should have won. And I'm sorry, I'll still say it. Mark Stoops made the wrong decision to punt. That's not the conversation for this moment. But you lose that Georgia game. You beat Ole Miss. And again, I feel like the fan base had this guy's back. They showed up for Vandy. You get a complete no-show in that game, and I'm sorry, but this was the stretch where if you were Kentucky, you had to make your move. I know that there are no easy games in the SEC, but we talked about it. After they beat Ole Miss, they were sitting there at what, 3-2, I guess it would have been. And we said, wait a second now, they're 3-2, and their next three, Vandy at home, at Florida, Auburn at home. There's no easy stretches in the SEC, but that is about as easy of a stretch as you could possibly get in SEC play. Vandy's a team you've taken care of previously. I know they're better, but it was at home. Florida is a place that you have had success. They won 2 of their last 3 at the Swamp prior to last week. And then, of course, Auburn was coming in really struggling. Well, you go 0-3, and here's the bottom line. If everybody wants to argue that Stoops, if you get to a bowl game, well, guess what? They're now 3-5. They still have at Tennessee and at Texas, which means they're either going to have to win at Tennessee or at Texas just to get bowl eligible. And that's if they beat Louisville, let alone when they play Murray State here in the coming weeks. So the standard has been lowered. I think this really goes back to last year. It's easy to forget now, but when he was flirting with the A&M, with A&M, going into that Louisville game, I think a lot of people were kind of like, you know what, if he wants to leave, we're okay with it. He ends up beating Louisville. He ends up having the situation with A&M. I don't really want to say he did turn him down, but he was going until he realized that he wasn't wanted there. And so the standard has been lowered. Now, what probably won't be lowered, and I want to talk about this because I know Kentucky fans, I haven't looked at the chat yet, but I already know what you're thinking. Torres, his buyout is bananas. He's going to be here as long as he wants. And here's the thing. I know the buyout's a lot. According to USA Today, it's about $44 million. But what I would say, I've been covering college sports long enough where when it gets so toxic and it gets so bad, it feels like we always kind of figure out a way to get whatever, for the change that needs to be made. And I feel like this is a change that needs to be made. With the buyout, first of all, let's remember, very few buyouts are a lump sum 100% payment on day one. Let's go back to Jimbo Fisher. Jimbo Fisher, when he's fired $76 million, that's the craziest thing. Even the Texas oil, but they can't do that. And then you realize, yeah, he's getting a big check, no doubt. I think it was like 10 to 12 to 15 million. But then the other 60 million is spread out over like 10 years. It's like $5 million a year for 10 years, and it's offset if he gets another job. And so that Jimbo Fisher salary, all of a sudden, you're like, you know what? It's not quite as bad as people make it out to be. By the way, John Calipari, I don't want to bring up John, a 4-letter word in Lexington right now, but what we had these conversations on this show in March, in April. We said it. He can't come back. It just feels like it's time for something new. Now he got another job, and that's where I'll be curious what happens next with Mark Stoops. Listen, I don't know what it's going to be or how it's going to go down. Is he going to be able to find another job? Frankly, I don't think there's going to be a lot of jobs even open this cycle. If Florida does what they need to do and they keep Billy Napier, just think there's not going to be a huge trickle-down effect. I'm not saying he would get the Florida job, but if Florida opens and they hire this guy, then maybe Stoops could slide over there. And I don't think it's going to happen. So does he take another job? Does he step aside? I mean, let me ask you, Kentucky fans, you guys follow this even closer than I do, and I try to follow everything as closely as I can. Does he look happy right now? That's the thing that stands out about Mark Stoops to me, is that when you watch his press conferences, I think he's over it. It feels like every press conference is the same answer to the same question. I don't know what's going on. We got to get better. We're going to work hard to figure it out. And I just think he's over it. And we know what his stance has been on NIL. We know what his stance, he's talked about it. He did that interview over the summer where I criticized him because he said, all my job is all about raising NIL money. And it's like, I think he's kind of over it. By the way, I think it's going to be hard for him to raise NIL money going into the portal. So again, I don't know if he's fired. I don't know if he finds another job. I don't know if there's a way where you can find a middle ground where maybe he resigns and you get for a reduced buyout. It'll be interesting. I know his relationship with Mitch Barnhart. I don't think Mitch Barnhart's going to fire him, but is there a way that they just sit down and say, do you really want to do this anymore? Do you really want to kind of run this back? I mean, by the way, the A&M thing, I think the A&M thing was kind of a reflection that he probably knew at last year that this thing had kind of peaked. They weren't very good last year. You're going to divisionless football. Remember, by the way, Kentucky, Barnhart and Stoops are two of the biggest proponents of keeping the SEC in an 8-game schedule because they know how much harder that makes the job. So listen, he's been incredible at Kentucky. This isn't a tear down Mark Stoops thing. It's not a make it personal thing. I've had a few interactions with him. He's always been kind to me. His staff has always been kind to me. This isn't about that. What it's about is there is a baseline standard when you're getting paid $9 million a year. And right now he's not meeting it. I will be curious if somewhere along the way he decides and the program decides to go in a different direction. Maybe later this week. By the way, we might have a little Kentucky basketball content, but maybe later this week we talk about potential candidates who could potentially fill that role. What kind of job is it? But right now, man, it just feels like it cannot keep going on like this.